Hello, everyone.
Hey,
How is everyone doing today?
hope you all are well. You may have noticed our swanky loading screen. One of our subscribers, Anne made that for us. We tweaked it slightly just because our naming scheme is confusing, but we're really appreciative that she threw that together for us. So there you go.
Judy has sent us a lot of art. She did
A
the
lot.
the Fred the Jovial Sith stuff that we used for a while. She's done
Yup.
some first senator election posters that we haven't used. Um,
No, we have not used those yet, but I think that would be fun for our. We'll do an eventual Bloodline stream when I finish Bloodline. I think.
but yeah, that's um. But I'm also realizing that this is the shirt I wore last Saturday when we did our stream about the Phantom Menace. Um, because
Meant to
football
be.
infects my life. Um, But yeah, so we're here for another of our. I actually put the wrong switch over to. There we go.
Oh.
Our our journey to the Rise of Skywalker streams, as we are watching a Star Wars film a week, and
Yep.
discussing it in some form or fashion. We've done this is our second stream, so not every week we may not have a.
Or
Want
we
to
may, or you never know. We'll see
yeah.
what happens.
I will say if we do this, it will be impressive because I feel like that
Yep.
will be the first time we've done like a
Something
thing
consistent.
regularly and with consistency. I mean, because at this point it's gonna be like 2038 by the time we finish the new Jedi Order, and we'll be on YouTube 4.0, and we'll just have to do whatever the newest version of TikTok videos back and forth are.
Yep.
Sarge can teach us how to do that.
Yeah, Sarge the TikTok master.
I'll have our Google
Uh,
glasses, and we'll just be beaming right into each other's brain spaces.
brains. Just like telepathic, like sending a message. But anyway, hello. Welcome, Sarge and Sin and McYagi. How are you guys doing? And Eva, welcome. A movie everyone's a hate loves to hate. I like this film for the most part. You were 15 going on 16 when it was released in 2002. And you really like the Yoda scene, you just don't like the head swap between, and that's fair. We both are big fans of Attack of the Clones, actually. I was live tweeting this earlier when I watched it. But yeah, we just kind of want to talk about and appreciate this movie for a bit as we move towards the Rise of Skywalker. So thank you so much for all of you for being with us.
Yeah, I will say this is I don't know that it's my favorite Star Wars movie, because
Mm-hmm.
it's hard for me to, and you and I have talked about this before.
Yeah.
When I think of what my favorite film is, and I think about ones that I have the most fun watching. Those are not always the same thing for me. But so this is one that I definitely have a fun time watching every time I watch it. And and the only thing I genuinely don't like about Attack of the Clones is the sound that Zam's speeder makes during the chase scene. Like I really like that. Just I don't know. It's almost like fingernails on a chalkboard or something to me. Like that's
That's odd. That's funny.
even above like the cringy picnic scene, like or the fireplace scene. Like that's
I think that's. I think we should just like have like a Twitter fight over like hating that sound effect and see what people think. Welcome Dan. Welcome Fat Batman. How are you doing? Good
that
to see you,
Batman
bud.
that didn't work out so well for it. Ever float your boat. But I will also say that Attack of the Clones has all of my favorite characters in it, except
Yeah.
for Kanan Jarrus, who didn't exist at the time. I mean, I guess who
Right.
did, but
Well, technically, in universe he existed, but out of universe he did not exist.
but Django Fett pops out. So you can see him hanging out in the background. Dex Jetster is one of my favorite characters. That was my avatar on the old Star Wars forums for like years. Um,
Hmm.
Jocasta Nu, another one of my favorite characters, and of course Obi-Wan is Yoda. Like,
Yep.
and Dooku. Like Dooku is probably my favorite of all of the Star Wars villains that we get, and
Yeah.
this is the most Dooku we get. Well, too. So
Well, and I can't watch this movie the same way anymore. Not to try to continue our Kevin Scott reference thing too much outside of the streamcast itself, but
throw it
like
up
I
anyway.
can't watch this movie the same way. Can't watch this movie the same way anymore. Since Jedi Lost,
Right.
just because Jedi Lost did so much for Dooku, and even like Legends canon had Dooku stuff, and of course we have the Clone Wars that has Dooku, but just to really explore that, and to have Dooku and Master and Apprentice both, like Master and Apprentice really cemented this idea of there was more to a Jedi or like a Padawan's training than just time with your master.
Right.
Like there was this idea of um Qui-Gon learned from Rael, who is Dooku's other Padawan, and that it would almost be kind of like this in lieu of families, this relationship. And then to see Obi-Wan, unless I'm mistaken, there's nowhere else in current canon where Obi-Wan has met Dooku in person before Attack of the Clones. Dooku has left the Jedi Order, I think, before Qui-Gon takes Obi-Wan as a Padawan. Um,
I wouldn't know the exact timing of that, but it happens. It depends on how soon before Master and Apprentice, um, Qui Gon takes
yeah.
on Obi Wan, because Qui Gon has not heard from Dooku in Master and Apprentice. Like tried to
hmm
reach out to him.
hmm
Dooku's not responding. I don't know how long Obi Wan Apprentice at that point.
And
Um,
and there was I watching this movie this time around, I realized there's the line, Qui-Gon always spoke very highly of you. And
yeah,
that actually really upset me this time because I'm like, oh, you piece of crap. Because you probably haven't spoken to Qui-Gon about Obi-Wan.
right,
And like this is such a manipulative line. And I like that. I like that something that got written has completely changed how I would read that scene.
right.
Um, or something like that. Real quick, Ava, I'm so glad you can join us. We kind of live on a UK schedule, and we kind of stream and publish on a UK schedule. So I'm glad you could join us.
Because of our work schedules, we end up doing
Yeah,
stuff in the day,
yeah.
or afternoon. But I also think too, one of the things that I kind of take from Jedi Lost and apply to this
hmm
too, in which I know this was a thing outside of Jedi Lost too, but
hmm
like, did Anakin never get a youngling clan? Because like he goes straight into Padawan by the end of Phantom Menace, and so
Yeah,
like that he misses out on part of that early like Jedi experience,
yeah,
that's not something I thought about until after Jedi Lost either.
yeah. And it's something where I think we might have talked about this a little bit in the Phantom Menace stream last week. That um, it's surprising to me that Anakin couldn't have spent even a year with other Jedi students,
Yeah,
Like especially considering Ahsoka's around 14 when she becomes Anakin's Padawan and she's considered young.
right,
Which is interesting. Now, that I've always wondered if that wasn't like a species thing, but that the Clone Wars movie also came out when we still had Legends canon and 13 was old for a human, so
right.
I thought that might be a thing. Thanks, Lobot.
Yeah, Mr. Spazworld hanging out too. I guess this schedule
Welcome.
works for a lot of
Yeah,
people.
I'm so glad that we have so many UK, and then Sarge isn't in the UK, but she is in that time zone. So glad you all could be here.
But I also think so. The two things that I feel like Attack of the Clones gets a bad rap for are
hmm
the romantic stuff with Anakin and Padme, and the graphics is one thing that I feel like I see most people complaining about.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I don't understand that at all. Um, because like I still remember, and maybe it was just because so this came out in
Oh, two.
2002, so
Yep.
I was 14 when
Yep.
this
I would have
came
been
out,
11.
and like I remember sitting there in the theater and just being awestruck
Mm-hmm.
with this film,
Mm-hmm.
and I still, maybe it's just the nostalgia of it, but still when I watch this, and with like the Blu-ray effects now, like I'm still just awestruck watching this film. The arena stuff when we see Camino and the fight
Mm-hmm.
between Obi-Wan and Django, and when we get Yoda and Dooku at the end, like I'm just from beginning to end, just I don't know, the effects
Yeah.
almost more than any other Star Wars film. If I'm honest, this film
Mm-hmm.
like stands out to me. I don't understand why it gets that type of it.
I mean, I think if you can, for me, like the another movie that came out in the same year was Two Towers. And so kind of comparing the look of this movie to the look of Two Towers, I think Two Towers has like a more kind of a realistic grittiness to its effects.
right?
Um,
But that's kind of
but
intentional.
yeah, it is, and I think to the extent some of or not some of Attack of the Clones look is intentional. Like I was watching the Coruscant speeder chase, and it looks almost like Blade Runner, like
Um,
the city in Blade Runner. And so I think there's a point where it's kind of it's kind of going for that stylization a little bit. Maybe not entirely, but I think it works. I think they pulled Yoda off, and that was Lucas's big thing. Is he was It's so weird because Lucas, if you watch the making ofs for Attack of the Clones, he fought against having a digital Yoda because he didn't want to do a digital Yoda um, if it wasn't going to work. But now it's so hard for me to think of Attack of the Clones with a puppet Yoda.
right.
Like I feel like that would have, to the extent that some people think Attack of the Clones is a dumpster fire. And Stuart, you're gonna find we're very friendly to Attack of the Clones here. I saw your comment earlier. And hey, welcome XY. I'm glad you made this one. Um, it's like to the extent that um he fought against that. I feel like Attack of the Clones could have really been a dumpster fire trying to
Um,
put like a puppet Yoda in all of
Doing
those
sweet flips.
spaces. Yeah, it's like how well they probably wouldn't have done a Yoda fight. Like you wouldn't have been able.
I mean, it just I don't know. Like I watched Phantom Menace last week on DVD. Still has
Mhm.
Puppet Yoda, and I'm incredibly grateful that Phantom Menace doesn't have Puppet Yoda. Like I've
Yeah.
never seen the Phantom
Oh.
Menace without Puppet Yoda, and like it's and I know you have thoughts about Last Jedi Puppet Yoda that we'll talk about when we get there,
Consider
in
the
a
Last
few
Jedi.
months.
Yeah.
Um but I don't know, and I think like and I understand some people, and I guess we can talk about this either now or at some point too. Um
Mhm.
because I know some people have like a problem with the idea of Yoda fighting, which
Mhm.
again I think he does as an absolute last resort, and I think that's what this
Yep.
movie is about. Is
Yep.
that all of this is an absolute last resort?
Yep.
They are participating in this because they know that they're going to lose the Republic either way if they don't.
Mhm.
Um, and so like some people have a problem with like seeing Yoda get involved in combat, but one, I think that's disingenuous because the Grand Master of the Jedi Order is going to know how to use a lightsaber. Like,
Right.
it's dumb to assume that that's not a skill he possesses, especially over a 900-year history. Like
Right.
he's gonna have sparred a few times
Yep.
across the years. Um, but also I still again maybe it's the nostalgia of it, and I'm usually somebody that hates nostalgic but um but I still just go back to that moment where I'm 14 and I'm sitting in the
Yep.
theater and Yoda drops his cane and pulls out his
Yep.
lightsaber and I'm like, "Wait, what is happening?" Like this is like just again, I don't know another word but like just awestruck.
Oh, well, and I mean, first of all, I mean, my name's Yoda Bauer. Everyone knows I'm like Yoda obsessed. That's like not even close to a secret. But I remember being because I it was the year I turned 12, but I was still 11 at the point that the movie came out, and I remember like being psyched. Like I remember sitting in the movie theater before the movie starts, like looking at strangers, going, "I heard Yoda fights in this one." Like I was so excited for it. And what's funny is at that age, I didn't even register he was digital because I probably never even registered he was a puppet because I was a kid and I didn't care. And it gets to the end, and I remember him like hobbling into the room, and the crowd cheered, Yoda, 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 and I just like I'll never forget that moment. As a side, Spaz World, I saw your comment. I'll get to that when we talk about that part of the story, but I didn't want you to think I ignored you. And Eva, am I saying is it Eva or Ava? I say everything wrong, so I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong. I do that with everyone. But yeah, there's so many really interesting sounds and effects within this movie. And Stuart, I am 29, old age 9. Sorry, active stat today, which I always love.
the old. Arc.
You're starting to sound garbly. Hey Neil, welcome. How are you? It wouldn't be one of our streams if we didn't have an issue. I look completely locked up.
Different now. I switched. There we go. I switched the.
Okay.
It's always something. Always something.
Yep,
Um,
there we go.
but so now that we're 20 minutes into this, like, how should like do we want to kind of go beat by beat through the film, or do you want to do themes, or like what? Or
I
do
mean,
you
we
just
were just talking about Yoda. I guess we can. I mean, chat has a lot. We can follow them, but like, I don't know. I have no real plan. I literally just watched the movie. Um, I think planning a stream on stream is great too. It's also very classic us. Um, Mr. Spazworld, who is apparently hanging out with Snoke's Legs, who's one of my favorite people on Twitter, by the way, said he just recently rewatched the movie for the first time in a while, and said he cringed but got invested more in the romance than he likes to admit. And I think that's a good thing to talk about in this movie. It's a case where, unlike when the original trilogy came out, and hello Neil, I might have been garbly when you came in, but I wanted to say hi again in case you didn't hear me. Um, but like with the original trilogy, before everyone knew Luke and Leia were siblings, romance was a question. Sequel trilogy has been a highly contested question on romances. Prequel trilogy, hello Nolan, welcome. Prequel trilogy, we pretty much knew that this was going to be about Anakin Skywalker and it was going to lead to Luke and Leia. There would be a romance.
right?
So there's a certain point where you're watching this with an inevitability,
Right.
which might, I mean, for some people, the chase and the will they won't they is the fun part. So maybe the inevitability took some steam out of it. The dialogue can be cringy, and at some level, the dialogue is cringy because God, I love George Lucas, but like not the best at writing super emotional dialogue. Um, but I think the story also gets an unfair shake because people forget that Anakin is 19 and Padme is 24, and it's not like either of them really had childhoods. Like Anakin makes a lot more sense when you remember he's 19 through this whole movie.
I mean, and neither of them has really had a relationship either. Like Padme talks about, the boy she liked in the youth legislature program, but like Queen Shadow tells us pretty explicitly that Padme's never really opened herself up to a relationship, and Anakin's never had that opportunity to do
Yep.
so. So like, it's awkward because of like the ages that they are. It's awkward because neither of them knows how to navigate romantic feelings of any kind. It's
Yep.
awkward because they both feel a personal connection that lasts a decade, but they've not seen each other for a decade. It it's awkward because they know that they can't be open with their feelings for one another,
Yep.
and so like it's awkward for all those reasons. And so like it's not that it's not awkward or that there aren't cringy moments to it,
Right.
but I feel like they're in universe explanations that don't all boil down to whatever problems we in 2019 might read on to.
Right.
Not that those things aren't things we should be aware of or take
Right.
seriously, um, but it's I don't know. I just I don't want to say I give it a pass because I still see that when I watch it now. I
Yeah.
mean, 14-year-old Terry just had the hugest crush in the world on Natalie Portman, and so like that was all I cared about. But
And 11-year-old Jess was much like 29-year-old Jess and just cared about Yoda. So not a whole lot has changed. um but I mean, what Eva was saying there is romance is the problem is chemistry between Padme and Anakin isn't necessarily there, but is okay in Sith. I think there's a valid point to that too. I mean, when we see Anakin and Padme, there isn't much chemistry beyond what they just remember of each other. That there were two kids, so
right,
they were 9 and 14, which would not be an age where they would you know, at 14, Padme is old enough to start kind of having more romantic interests, but not necessarily for a 9-year-old, and a 9-year-old wouldn't necessarily have those kind of feelings. But
Right.
they knew each other, and they went through this really intense, life-changing thing together, and now they're seeing each other as young adults, full of hormones, having those memories, and then now thrown into another life changing situation. There's not necessarily chemistry there, there's circumstance that kind of creates this spark, and this kind of past that they really don't have with anyone else. You know, Padme has a past, I guess, with Clovis, that we see in the Clone Wars, but not much of one. And Anakin wouldn't have a past with anybody.
Right.
And so, you know, throw that into being alone together in a lake house in Italy, you know, things are going to happen. But
Right.
then we get to Revenge of the Sith, and granted, Lucas didn't have this spelled out at the time, but we now see with the Clone Wars, they went through all these things together, and they've had these opportunities to actually grow and develop a relationship where you can have that chemistry in Revenge of the Sith. So, you know, that I again, I I think a lot of it, you know, I don't want to earn my shill check from Disney too hard, I guess, and like explain away everything. Like,
I do.
yeah, you know, I'm not gonna sit here and be like, you know, this is the secret film that should have been in the Centurion collection or whatever. But I think there are more in-universe explanations for things than people want to give it credit for.
I mean, and I think both of them too live very high pressure lives,
Yep.
and all of a sudden they have someone that they can be vulnerable with, and that's not something they have. You know, like even Padme with her handmaidens doesn't have that,
Hmm.
and even Anakin with Obi-Wan doesn't have that because that's still his master. That
Yeah.
that goes back to when I was saying that he didn't have a youngling clan, so he doesn't have like these are his best friends in the order outside of Obi-Wan. Like he's got Obi-Wan, and
Hmm.
Obi-Wan is his master and not his friend.
And
And
also really cranky this whole movie.
yeah. Which I appreciate, and
Yeah.
I explain away as being just the side effect of having a mullet. Like when you
Yep.
have a mullet,
Who isn't
it's
cranky when they have a mullet? Let's
it's
be honest.
but I don't know, and I say all that to say that I like it definitely is cringy. Like I don't think we would
Yeah.
say that it's not, but I feel like there are reasons for it despite that.
Yeah.
I mean because it's just as cringy that Luke and Leia kissed and they were brother and sister, but like
Right.
they're in universe explanations for it. Like
Right.
um I don't know, but
Um, moving along, Neil asked a few minutes back, was Dooku enough of a departure from Maul? Which I think is a very interesting question. Um, when you look at, I think I've said this on other streams. This is not my unique idea. This is something I've seen in other places. But if you look at the three villains of the prequel trilogy, outside of Vader and Palpatine, you have Maul, Dooku, and Grievous, and they all kind of, hello, John, welcome. They all kind of represent a different aspect of Vader, right? You know, Grievous is the mechanical monster part, and Dooku is the kind of leader part, and Maul is the warrior part.
right,
And so seeing Dooku, I mean, Dooku is to me a grand departure from Maul, and I think in a good way, in a way that makes a lot of sense. I mean, Dooku's your certainly. I mean, I love Dooku, but he's certainly dearer to you than me. So, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean I think even if you look at their Sith names, like I think Maul like is meant to be like literally a weapon. Like, that's what
Hmm.
Palpatine had him for, was a weapon.
Yeah.
And I think with Dooku, like Dooku is meant to be the political manipulator. And one of the reasons why I have such an affection for Dooku as a character is
Hmm.
because I'm so curious, and we got a lot of this in Jedi Lost, which is
Yeah.
what I wanted out of Jedi Lost, and what we got. So I was more than pleased with it. Because my question has always been, we talked about this then when we did our Jedi Lost stream. My question
Hmm.
has always been, did Dooku's politics come before he fell to the dark side or as a result of him falling to the dark side.
Right.
Because just like Anakin says in the picnic scene, Dooku's not wrong when he's talking about the corruption in the Republic. Oh, that's what motivates Padme to address the Senate in Phantom Menace is that the
Mm-hmm.
Republic is corrupt. So like
Yeah.
it's a thing that we know for a fact that the Republic is corrupt. And so like
Mm-hmm.
Dooku in wanting to, like pursue other options, like there's he has a point to make. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's so compelling too. And again, like what breaks my heart about Dooku is because I feel like especially after Master and Apprentice and after Jedi Lost, you can kind of see how Dooku has changed. Um, because before Attack of the Clones, we never saw Jedi Master Dooku. We never
Mm-hmm.
saw Dooku in any other light but this one. So like when Mace said, oh, he's a Jedi, he would never do these things. Like
Right.
we have no background to believe that or not. Um, so but now we do. We can see the Dooku that had a heart. The Dooku that wanted desperately to be picked by a master. The Dooku that I think Yoda was training to be the next Grand Master of the Order, and the Dooku that leaves because he has ethical problems with the relationship between the Jedi and the Republic.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I think it's so fascinating, and I think that's
Yeah.
completely different from Maul. Maul,
Yeah.
who was not, I don't want to say one dimensional because that makes it sound like it's a bad thing, but
Right.
like the character of Maul, like Palpatine chose Maul to be like an assassin, you
Yeah.
know.
100%.
And it's I know we both have issues with this, but if you look at the Legends Plagueis novel too, like
Mm-hmm.
Maul was not even chosen to be like a Sith apprentice. He was chosen to
Right.
be an assassin. And that's a completely different. I mean, it's like with Asajj Ventress, like Asajj was chosen to be an assassin. I think Maul and Dooku are very different. Um,
Yeah, and I mean, I was kind of with Stuart there on his opinion on Maul. I never got what the Maul hype was with just the Phantom Menace, and I know you and I were both kind of like sketchy when Spider Maul came into Clone Wars, but now with what Clone Wars did and then Rebels did with Maul, I adore the character. Like they fleshed him out
Absolutely.
in such a great way, which added kind of to the tragedy of his story because I feel like Palpatine did pick him to be an assassin, and he could have been so much more, uh, and that sort of thing. Um, and but I mean that's a whole other thing. We can even get into Maul a little bit when we get to the solo stream.
And
But
for another stream we'll do at the end of
yeah, 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 that's true. That's true. Um, but with Dooku, what do you I think the answer is yes, but do you think that Palpatine would have found a way to rid himself of Maul to get Dooku as his apprentice then? Had Maul not supposedly died on Naboo?
I
Calamari, welcome.
I think so. I think Maul
Mhm.
was always like I don't think Palpatine had grand plans for him. If
Mhm.
if anything, I think Palpatine was going to let Maul kill as many Jedi as he could, but
Yeah.
I think at some point Maul was always going to be like Maul was eventually supposed to get killed.
Mhm.
Because like Maul's not a political leader. I mean, he ends up being a leader
Right.
who understands how groups operate, but that's only after he almost died.
Mhm.
And we get that in Clone Wars and Rebels, and like that's not the Maul we see.
Right.
I don't think Palpatine had those expectations, but I think the same honestly is true of Dooku. Like
Yeah.
I don't know, especially once Palpatine becomes aware of Anakin, which he becomes aware of Anakin before Dooku falls to the light side, right?
Yeah. I think so. I mean, it certainly in Legends, Palpatine was aware that Plagueis was doing experiments. Although
Right.
I think he discovers Anakin when everyone else does. I don't think that was a part of the
Yeah,
plan.
yeah, that's maybe so because I was thinking that Dooku fall came after Phantom Menace, but I guess it's before.
It's before, yeah.
But even
But
then,
yeah,
like or he's leaving the Order anyway. We don't know exactly when he him as
right.
his apprentice. That part I would
Yes.
imagine happens after family. But
Yeah.
but so like I don't think he had long term plans for Dooku either. I think he knows that he needs somebody that can be a political part of this plan, and he knows
Hmm.
that Dooku, even from Jedi Lost, we know that Dooku like is popular with the Senate and has addressed the Senate, and
Right.
this political mastermind. And I think that's what he needed out of Dooku. And so I mean, and maybe even with Vader, like I feel like Palpatine is
Hmm.
choosing his apprentices to serve a purpose, and their purposes are
Yep.
different.
Yep.
But and at least until we get to Anakin, I don't know that he has long term machinations for any of them.
Well, not to throw shade at anybody with this comment, but I don't think Palpatine had long term plans for Dooku either, because he's picking somebody that's the same age. Like
Right,
typically, you want somebody younger. Hey, boss, welcome. Good to see you. Typically, you want somebody who's younger, who you know would either carry on for you or can do the things you can't. That sort of thing. And I think that's what he finds, useful in Anakin. Um, and so I think for Dooku, he almost wanted the older, the elder statesman to fill that role, because that's something, somebody would they would be more likely to follow him. And so I think to that extent too, he was eventually destined to be discarded.
I mean, but I also think Maul, and again, I don't want to go with um comparing legends and canon versions of how Maul
Hmm.
gets brought into this.
Right.
But either way, like I think Maul is a thing of happenstance almost,
Hmm.
where Palpatine kind of stumbles across Maul and uses him for a purpose. Where I
Yeah.
feel like Dooku was recruited, Anakin was
Yep.
recruited, and so I feel like they are used in different ways because like Palpatine like has a long term plan to seduce both of them, and I
Yeah.
I don't that was not the case with Maul. Like Maul was offered up by the Night Sister. Um,
Right. Well, and even to that point, to look at Jedi Lost, I think that Palpatine had his eye on Dooku for quite some time. I
I
don't
think
think it's
so too.
confirmed. I don't think it's confirmed in Jedi Lost, but I mean, it's convenient that Dooku met Palpatine through because of Rael.
Right?
Rael is, and I think I always say it wrong because I've heard it pronounced a couple different ways, but I say everything wrong, so it's fine. But um, there's a point where Rael's like, "Hey, my buddy who's a senator super wants to meet you for some reason," and I have to wonder, like, was Palpatine just making friends with anybody who was a Jedi, or did he buddy up to Rael to get to Dooku? Oh, sorry, Stuart. We're kind of all over the place with that one. There's spoilers abounding in
You
here.
can contrast that with our friend Sin, who might still be in the chat too, who's listened to it literally 100 times.
Literally, quite literally, probably more than now. And Nolan, just as an aside, I think you would like Jedi Lost. I'll DM you about it later, but that's a whole other thing. XY says Night Sisters didn't offer him. Talzin didn't apply. Basically, yeah. Um, you're still on Black Spire Outpost. Gotcha. Um, yeah, I think Talzin had to give him up. Well, Talzin had to give up Ventress. I know that because I just watched those episodes. But I'll take your word for it too that it wasn't necessarily a get. I don't think that anybody leaves Dathomir or as a child by choice though. So I think that's fair. Was Shmi dying more important to the overall path of Anakin? Was it the catalyst for him seeking a connection with Padme? I don't think it was the catalyst. I think that there's a I think that they have a more innocent connection in Phantom Menace because they're just both too young to have really had anything else in mind. But when Anakin sees Padme again, he says, he's been dreaming about her, which is not necessarily a thing that you say to your neighbor that you haven't seen in 10 years.
Right?
There's certain implications about how he keeps talking about how he's been dreaming about her. So I wouldn't say it's the catalyst. I would say that the loss of Anakin's mother is what intensified his need to replace a relationship with another one, even if it would be a different kind of relationship. I think Shmi dying is a huge part to his path because she is someone. I think she's someone that could have pulled him back, to be honest. And I think that's probably why Palpatine, the Chancellor of the Galactic Republic, certainly could have gotten his mother free. I'm
Right.
sorry. Pat, in Queen Shadow, we talk a lot about how the Jedi don't go do anything about slavery, and Qui Gon wants the Jedi to go do something about slavery. And they should, like, I'm not saying they shouldn't, and I'm not saying that's wrong, but like, Anakin is literally best friends with the most powerful man in the Republic, and the
Right.
Chancellor never gets blamed for not going to find a way to free Shmi. If Klieg Lars could buy, or well, like buy her to free her and marry her, then certainly the Chancellor of the Galactic Republic could have.
Right.
So I think it's very much in Palpatine's plans to keep Shmi in slavery, to separate Anakin from this one tether he could have had to the light side.
I mean, I think so too, and I think there's such an element of guilt that runs through all of Anakin and then later Vader's life, because like that's what sets him on the path, to wanting to find a cure for death, because
Right.
he feels right from the Phantom Menace he feels the guilt of leaving his mother. Like in the scene, in the Phantom Menace where he's before the Jedi Council and they're like, your thoughts go to your mother. Um,
Hmm.
like even then he's feeling guilty, and like the dreams that he has, which I have a different read now, I think, and I've thought about this more about telling Padme that he has dreams about her,
Yeah.
because like I think the easy read is the type of dream that teenage boys might have, but I
Right.
think you have to also consider that he's a Jedi and Jedi have
Right.
dreams that mean different things. And so
Right.
maybe it's less creepy than I don't
Yeah,
know. I
I
I
think
think that's
so.
supposed to sound creepy, but I don't know that that's what he means when he says that.
Right.
Um
I don't think he would, like, in front of his Jedi master, really talk about those kind of dreams and,
right.
like, think that that's socially I think it's more likely he's socially awkward to not understand that there's a different kind of dream that
Yeah.
he could be talking about, if
He
that makes
didn't he
sense.
didn't get to hang out with Uncle Rael enough to know about
Right,
about
it's just the other stuff.
um but
Um,
but I feel like he feels such guilt about Shmi because he feels like he left her already, and like he feels like because of those dreams like something is wrong now, and like when he gets back and it's too late, I think
mhm,
he lashes out in anger, but that anger is motivated not from it's almost like it's less motivated from fear and more
mhm,
motivated from guilt. And I don't know that the Jedi know what to do with that, because
mhm,
his path to becoming a Jedi is so different than anybody else. Like nobody
right.
else has guilt about leaving their parents because none of them knew their parents. And Anakin is just different in that regard.
We got Nolan asking about uh, Shmi being on Palpatine's radar, and Mr. Spazworld talking about could they be a manipulation? Those are excellent questions. And to go off of what Calamari is saying, um, I think that Anakin's dreams about Padme, maybe not entirely, but are largely manipulations of Palpatine in Revenge of the Sith. Um, I think to some extent the dreams he's having about his mother in Attack the Clones are real because his mother is in danger, and does happen to be in danger when he starts having dreams about her. But I would not doubt for a second that Palpatine is manipulating them to some degree, or messing with the intensity of them, or in some way involved. Or, I mean, he's a powerful dude. Palpatine could have somehow inspired the Sand People to take her. I mean, it's
Right.
also just possible that Sand People took her because that's a thing that could happen. So I'm not going like full tinfoil hat. Like, what is that the GIF on that everyone uses on Twitter with like the board and all the red yarn? Like, I'm not going quite that conspiracy theorist, but I also think it's possible. Like, Palpatine had that kind of power and that kind of connection, where he could have. I mean, the to think that Anakin's mother is kidnapped and then killed like the day the Clone Wars break out
Right.
is kind of convenient.
I mean, I think you could also read it a different way, and
Hmm.
I'm not saying that any of this is right or wrong, but
Right.
so we know from the scene where Anakin kills the Sand People, we know that
Hmm.
Qui Gon is
Yeah.
observing that
Yep.
because Yoda hears Qui Gon observing
Yep.
that, and so like maybe like the dreams that Anakin is having about his mother are being influenced partially by Qui Gon because Qui Gon is like, no, we left this woman there, and now she's in danger, and
No.
I need to use whatever I abilities I have from beyond the grave to push this issue because it's a wrong that I need righted. Um,
That's interesting.
there's very little evidence for that, but,
Right.
but
Interesting. Do you think Qui-Gon is the type that would try to manipulate the chosen one in that way, especially after death?
I mean, but is it manipulation if you're just like, hey, your mom has been kidnapped?
That's
Like,
fair.
it's not, hey,
That's
your
fair.
mom has been kidnapped because I want you to go murder people and start down the dark side,
Right.
but
That's fair.
hey, this is
That's
a
fair.
thing that I can see that you can't, and maybe you should be aware.
My question when I was watching it this time is, do you think Anakin was able to hear Qui-Gon? We know Yoda can, and we know Qui-Gon was trying to talk to Anakin, but do you think Anakin in his rage versus like Yoda who's meditating, do you think Anakin in his rage could hear it? Do you think that maybe Qui-Gon wasn't able to manifest himself fully? I mean, the fact that he doesn't really reveal himself to Yoda in until Revenge of the Sith could either mean he wasn't allowed to or was unable to. That,
Right.
maybe he's at a point where only somebody like Yoda who's more trained could hear him and Anakin couldn't hear him yet.
I think that's the case,
Hmm.
but maybe Anakin did. I don't. Um,
I like the idea of Qui-Gon being unknowingly heard by Anakin. Well, that's interesting. I mean, but he's yelling like Anakin. um, I just like the. I want to know. What would be interesting is a story from Ghost Qui-Gon's perspective of the rest of the prequel trilogy. Maybe he just didn't want to, maybe he had a rough life. Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, it could be a greater manipulation, but it also could just be his mom happened to go get kidnapped like the day before the Clone Wars broke out, and Anakin happened to find her. Like it could all just be. I mean, I guess there's no such thing as luck and no such thing as coincidence in Star Wars, but it could have been a greater plan for the Force.
right.
Him going after his mother put him on the planet that allowed him to save Obi-Wan. So maybe it was some greater plan for the Force, and Anakin reacted as Anakin reacted, and it has nothing to do with Qui-Gon or Palpatine.
Right.
And yeah, and John's right. Maybe Anakin hears Qui-Gon and doesn't listen or dismisses it or doesn't believe the voice.
I mean, and another related topic that I think is important if we're talking about Attack of the Clones and
Mhm.
dreams and what the Force reveals to you, again,
Mhm.
to tie it back into Jedi Lost, is we get the creation of the clone army that comes as a result of
Mhm.
visions that the Force gives
Yeah.
to Sifo-Dyas.
Yep.
And like whether or not those are things he's seeing because he's seeing the future, or is he being seen them because Palpatine is manipulating it? Is he
Right.
being shown them because the Force is pushing things towards a certain direction? Like all of those
Mhm.
things are debatable too, but it's the exact same thing, just for a different person and about a different thing. Um,
Yeah. And to me, Attack of the Clones is still kind of that. I mean, there's so many branches it can go, and even though I still hold that the Jedi were kind of done for as soon as Palpatine took office in Phantom Menace. I that is one of the hills I will die on.
yeah,
But I, at the same time, think that there's still a lot of possible ways Attack of the Clones could have gone, with just a few differences eh, here or there. I don't know.
well, and I think too, though, there was so much debate at the time about who is Sifo-Dyas because it was a Jedi Master that none of. But like,
Hmm.
I we technically don't know like, was Sifo-Dyas killed before or after the Phantom Menace in canon? Like, we don't have a canon explanation for
Yes,
Sifo-Dyas' death. Do we know that?
yes. There's one Clone Wars episode in season 6, the Netflix only season, and it talks about Sifo-Dyas. Um, and I even watched it before I listened to Jedi Lost, and now I'm already kind of blanking. But there might be some people in the chat who remember better than I do. But I think it's that Sifo Pikes murdered him. Yeah. Did the Pikes murder him in the episode and they found his assistant, or Sifo-Dyas is alive until that episode and the Pikes murdered him? Because I know they find a guy. I can't remember if that was Sifo-Dyas or if that was Sifo-Dyas' assistant. You would think I'd remember because that's a key factor, but I just remember that it was the Pikes that murdered him.
I mean, but either
And
way, he at least goes missing at some
yes,
point. And so
yes,
like
the Jedi are think he's dead. Yes,
my point was
they
like
ate his
whatever
body.
visions he has, depending on when that happens. Yeah, that's what I thought, that they'd murdered him before. Because either way,
Okay.
like that could also all be part of Palpatine's plan. Like, we don't have enough
Mhm.
of a canon story to tell us whether that was something that Palpatine influenced or not. Which is the same question with Anakin's visions about his.
Right. So yeah, and I remember back before we knew who Sifo-Dyas was, like I always thought Sifo-Dyas was like a made up name, and like because it sounds like Sidious,
Right.
and like that was my beef for a long time of like why did we have to invent a story, like a whole story for this guy that was probably just like an alias for Sidious, or maybe Sidious picked him because of the name Sifo-Dyas. Like I think the name connection there is too much
I will say
for
the one
me.
thing I didn't like about Jedi Lost was how people called him sci-fi or Sifo.
Sifo.
Because
Oh, because you're just used
it's
to it.
yep, it's just like when
I
is
struggled more
it
with Duke.
well, yeah, that
Calling
was
him Duke, really, I struggled with that
yeah,
one.
that was there too, but it's right up there. Is it Princess of Alderaan where Mon Mothma tells Leia to call her Mon? And I'm like, no,
Mon,
like
yeah, you're like,
your
no,
name
your
is not
name is
Mon,
Mon
it's Mon.
Mothma.
Yeah, like there's like you don't get a first name, you like only Mon Mothma.
Only
Um,
Mon Mothma. Well, it's just like I still refuse to acknowledge that Palpatine has a canon first name. We all have our issues.
but so I also want to pivot because we've been going for 50 minutes now, and I've
Yeah,
barely mentioned the most awesome character in all of Star Wars that
right.
we get from this, and that's
Hmm.
Jango Fett. So like your
Yes,
your name comes from this film maybe, but so does mine. Like
right.
even more explicitly, because Jango Fett is just my like seriously my favorite character. Especially in terms of like I just think he's the coolest person in all of Star Wars, and that I agree. XY Shiv is
Hmm.
great, especially if you read it as like prison Shiv, like if that's how you pronounce it. Even like I like that better, but
His name is Frank, and
he said so last
his
week.
name will always be Frank.
That is what he said last week. Um, but I mean, but yeah, I love Dex too. I think Dex is such a great character, and I really hate that in either canon we never got more Dex. Like the only canon thing apart from Attack of the Clones with Dex is that one Adventures in Wild Space like story at the end of the
Hmm.
issue. But
Yep.
I think Django is such an interesting character, who gets recruited by the Sith to fulfill this
Hmm.
army for the Jedi, and like that, he becomes like the thing with the template for the clone army. I love the fight that he has with Obi-Wan. I don't know. I know he's not
Yeah.
as deep of a character as other people, and we can't talk about like the Force philosophy of Jango Fett. But I have always loved Jango Fett. As soon as I saw him on screen, I was just enraptured.
Well, I think there is a lot there. I don't know. Did you ever read the kid chapter book Boba Fett novels that
I
came out
did,
around the time of
yes.
Attack of the Clones? I haven't read them in so long. I own the first one, but I loved that series, even though like it's so long ago I don't remember it in a lot of detail. But I liked the like journal entries that Django left for Boba to teach him, and then you and I both read the Age of Republic villains issue for Django, and that involved him teaching Boba. And I think there's, he Django is often described as a more honorable bounty hunter, unless you're talking to the people from Mandalore. But like even Hondo, I just rewatched season 2 of Clone Wars, and there's the Boba Fett episodes, and Hondo's trying to talk to Boba, like, Boba, your father would not be into you seeking revenge for him in this way. Like, not necessarily mad that he's seeking revenge, but
Right.
like the depths that he's doing it, and to the extent that he's hurting all of these other people. Like, Django was a bounty hunter, was totally willing to murder people in these intense ways, but
Yep.
he wasn't. It's not like he got a high off of causing as much damage as he possibly could,
Right.
which makes him a little bit more interesting.
I mean, but even with the Claudia, we're just gonna have to agree to disagree on. Um, but like even the like the legends backstory for Django, Nolan was talking about Montross, but like the whole
Hmm.
story with Jaster Muriel and what happened with all
Yep.
the Mandalorians. Like I don't know how familiar everybody with Calamari, the Bounty Hunter game is why I like Django Fett. I'll be honest, I played that game before I saw Attack of the Clones, and
Hmm.
it's still one of my favorite Star Wars games. I guess I
We
should
have a couple of Let's Plays.
at some point I guess I should finish that because like that it tells us the story of how he meets Sam. It tells us the story of how he gets recruited by Count Dooku. Like all of that's there and was a lot of Legends information about the lead up to Attack of the Clones. But
Hey, Skynobi, welcome.
I don't know that I have a whole lot more to say about that, but I couldn't have us go for
Could
an
not
hour
bring it up
and not bring up,
and
hey, my
not talk.
favorite
Yeah,
character in all of Star Wars is here. And I still love the fight with I love that he's a non-Jedi and is able to hold his own against Obi-Wan.
we want.
Um,
Yep.
Obi-Wan being my favorite Jedi, I think makes that a special moment for me too. Um, I don't know, I just love all of that.
And well, I love, my favorite part of that fight is when he and Obi are fighting, and Obi kicks him off of the building,
Oh
but
yeah,
Obi
tethered.
Wan forgets that he's like tethered to him,
Yep.
and then he's just like, "Oh, not good." It's just, I don't know why that just, it's so Obi Wan to me. Like, Obi Wan is just a dork sometimes in the best way. Um, but that's, it's just a fun fight between the two of them and how it goes back and forth, and it it it's very credible the way they do it. The way that Django is able to keep uh, Obi Wan on his toes in a way that doesn't make Obi Wan look weak just because he's getting beaten by somebody who doesn't have force powers. And then in the arena, when Windu's there and he goes to attack Windu, I didn't always think of it until right then, but he just like pulls out his flamethrower, and it's like he's like, I'm sick of these Jedi. I'm sick of these lightsabers that can just reflect blaster bolts. Apparently, I'm just gonna use a flamethrower and burn those stupid rogues. Like, I think that's good
Which
stuff.
it's funny too because if I don't know if I'll ever finish my bounty hunter let's play, but like the climactic parts of that, you're fighting against a force cult called the Bando Gora, and the
Yeah,
easiest thing to do is just flamethrower them all because they're all coming at you with force powers that you don't have. And so like
right.
that's still what I think about in that arena. He's like, "Oh no, I just did this not too long ago with with this force cult that I had to fight." And so now I'll just try the same thing. Um,
Yep.
but I really love the arena fight too. Since you bring that up, um, I it is Obi Wan at his quippiest, and I
Yep.
love it. I love every minute of it. When he's like, um, Anakin says, we came to rescue you, and Obi Wan says, "Good
Like,
job,"
good job.
and he says, tells Anakin that Padme seems to be on top of things. Like
Thanks.
it's Obi Wan at his quippiest, and especially before we had the Clone Wars. Like it
Yeah.
was definitely the quippiest Obi-Wan we ever
Oh
got,
yeah.
and I just
Yep.
loved it. I still love the Foundry scenes. Like I think it's
Yep.
just such an exciting sequence. And I know somebody a while back said they didn't like the 3PO head switch, but
Yeah.
um,
I mean,
I still enjoyed that.
I appreciated it just for the puns, like well, this is such a drag, or I'm quite beside myself, because I love puns. But like, that's, I mean, that's kid humor. Like, you're either gonna like the kid humor in the movie or not. And if you don't like kid humor, that's fine. Like you're not obligated to like all of that, but that's
Right.
in there for the 8-year-olds, you know.
And then when Yoda lands, and make a perimeter, around the survivors, a perimeter create, and then you go out
Mhm.
and it's
Yeah.
the big battle scene, like all of that. I was just so
Uh,
taken by all of it. And
it is a fun movie. I mean, like it's a movie that has these crazy fight scenes, and then Obi-Wan's on this like weird detective thing. Obi-Wan, by the way, is like the worst detective ever because he goes to Camino and they're like, "I'm expected." He's like, "The army? Oh yeah, I'm totally here to see the army." And the Camino it must be like these Jedi are so weird.
right,
What is up with them? Oh
new
man.
programs, combat,
Right.
or C-3PO is Palpatine. I've seen
That's
on Twitter.
which is going to be my Twitter name until I see the Rise of Skywalker. That'll be my one wacky theory that's right. Palpatine is 3PO.
What the red arm is all about. Um,
Yep.
but but
Foreshadowing.
I really think it's just such a well made. I know it gets
Mhm.
a rap as like a lot of people list favorite Star.
Yep.
It's not that I
At
don't
least until The
understand the.
Last Jedi came out.
Yeah, well, that's a completely different thing, but um, but like even just subtle things like the fact that they manipulate Jar Jar into giving the Chancellor emergency powers, like
Well,
that's
see, some people love that part because I mean that's where the Darth Jar Jar part comes in.
right,
Um, I don't know. With that, when I watched that part this time, it's so weird how it happens because it's Palpatine and Masameda with Bail Organa, who should totally know better. So I don't know why he doesn't say anything.
yeah,
And Masameda of all people is like, if only Senator Organa was here, as if he likes her at all, because he definitely doesn't.
right,
And Jar Jar's like, I should do this. And I'm like, Padme would never in a million years have voted for the thing. Um, and so they get Jar Jar to do it. And it's interesting because the aftermath books, Empire's End, one of the interludes deals with Jar Jar's
right.
guilt. He's so guilt stricken from what he did with Palpatine, which is
Right.
kind of an interesting throwback.
I think it's just there's so much worked in, and I feel like you get so caught up in the romance story. Like,
Hmm.
if that's all you see, then whether or not you like the film hinges on not you like the romance.
Right.
And I just feel like there's so much more going to it. Like even again like the small things, like the difference
Ooh.
between knowledge and wisdom, and how much do we rely on the temple droids, and like what does it mean that you know if it's not in the archives it doesn't exist versus
Right. Oh,
the
God.
youngling that's able to feel like to suss out what's wrong with
Yeah.
that. Like,
Yeah.
oh,
It's like,
obviously then it was deleted, like um,
yeah. It's like
like that would never
clearly.
occur to the grown-ups in the room, but like it
Right.
appears to the kid.
Yeah, and I mean, it goes to Yoda's line, which is one of my favorite lines to pull out whenever people are talking about how like all the Jedi in the prequel era were terrible. Yoda's line of um, you know, arrogance is a flaw more and more common among Jedi. Too sure of themselves they are, even the older, more experienced ones. And that's 100% throwing shade back at Obi-Wan. Like
Oh yeah, it
Obi-Wan's
definitely
like,
is.
Anakin's so arrogant. He's like, yeah, because the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, buddy, is basically what he's saying there. But then to see that get played out, where Jocasta, who we know, we see later we just read Charles Soule's Vader, and she's great in that, but she does have an arrogance about her. Not that it didn't pan out for the best, probably, but she doesn't let the Jedi who becomes the Grand Inquisitor read any books. Um, but then you have Yoda, and again, anything that's like Yoda being awesome makes me happy. But like that scene where it's Yoda could have so easily have gone, "Hey kids, you keep doing your drills. I got to go work with Obi-Wan because I'm the Grand Master, and you're just like a bunch of 5-year-olds." But instead, he opens it up to the room and he's like, "No, we're all Jedi here. Like,
No,
what do you think?" And I almost think that Yoda could have come to that conclusion on his own too, but he wanted to see if the kids would come to that conclusion.
Right. Well, and I think it's so obvious to us as viewers that Dooku did it, and I think it's
Hmm.
probably obvious in retrospect that Dooku did it. But
Right.
at the same time, like that they never put together like raises those questions about was it deleted to obscure like the fact that the clone army was created. Like I feel like there's so much
Right.
there that the Jedi like choose not to look at. Um,
Right.
but while we're talking about Yoda, I will also say that I one because it's cool. Again, that 14-year-old
Hmm.
seeing it in the theaters. I love the
Yep.
fight between Yoda and Dooku, but I
Hmm.
also love it because I feel like, and I get this especially from Jedi Lost, and even more so
Hmm.
from I don't know if we've not done a stream on this, but we've talked about it at different
We
points. But
haven't, but
if you've
I'm
not
obsessed with
read
the book.
the Legends novel Yoda Dark Rendezvous, you do yourself a favor and go read it because
In
um
the new year, I might do a book club on it and
yeah,
do our first Legends book because I really want to talk about it.
that was
But
the
anyway,
first book I read this year. I was
yeah,
looking back on my Goodreads list the other day. It was the first thing I read this year. But
it's.
if Yoda had wanted to defeat Dooku in that moment, I
Hmm.
think he 100% could have just walked
Yep.
into that cave and wrecked his face.
Yep.
And he's doing this one because I don't believe, like he says, I sense the dark side in you. But it's in
Hmm.
that moment that he's having to come to terms with the fact that his own apprentice, who he already feels like he failed, or that
Hmm.
the Jedi Order failed in some way or another.
Hmm.
Like he's having to come to terms with maybe my apprentice is a Sith now. Like what does that mean? But I feel like
Yeah.
he he chooses not to kill him, and that's something that he could have done, and it says a lot about the character of Yoda that he could have killed Dooku in that moment and doesn't, and chooses to save Anakin and Obi-Wan over continuing to fight with
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like apart from like the cool oh he caught the force lightning and dispersed it kind of moment, and like all the sweet flips that he does, like I feel like we learn a lot about the character of Yoda and the character of
Hmm.
that battle at the end.
Well, I think it hit me this time watching the movie through that at the beginning of the movie, when Padme's like, "I think Count Dooku's behind this." It's not Yoda who goes, "It can't be him." It's Mace Windu. And it's interesting that Yoda is not the one defending his Padawan, his former Padawan. And is it because Yoda just wouldn't speak like that, or is it that Yoda isn't sure he can believe that anymore?
Right?
Or is he just really mad because Padme totally ignored him? Because he was like, "Seeing you alive brings warm feelings to my heart." And Padme's like, "Do we know what happened to me?" And I'm like, "Wow, that's kind of rude.
Right.
Yikes." So that, I mean, he could still be reeling from that. I don't know.
I mean, and Queen Shadow, to go all the way back to the beginning of the film, Queen Shadow makes that moment more special to me now too,
Yeah.
when the handmaiden gives her life for.
Yeah.
But, um, I don't know. I don't know if we've talked about this on stream before too, but just for the record, I will say that I love that canon has like underscored that Dooku was literally Yoda's apprentice, and there
Hmm.
wasn't some other
Yes.
like weird explanation for that line. Um,
Yep. Yeah, that was one of it's one of my favorite things about new canon versus Legends. Because in Legends, it was actually Yoda trained this other guy who trained Dooku, and I remember being young and thinking, "This is dumb. Like, why did we have to make this more complicated?" But I guess we did. And then when it was cemented in the releases we got this year, I was so relieved. I'm like, "Thank you. Like, just make that line make sense."
are there other things? I know we're over an hour at this point, but other things that you want to mention or talk about? I feel like there's so many things we could
There's so many
say.
things that we've missed. Thank you guys for such an active chat. I know we've missed a bunch of things, and I'm sorry, and that's not intentional. You guys are just so awesome. But I appreciate you guys being able to talk amongst yourselves and offering where you can, and thank you for being patient with that. But no, I'm excited. It's been fun watching these again because as many times as I've seen both Phantom and this movie, I still spot new things and think of new things, and sometimes that's because I've read something new. But just trying to look through and see this. What I'm trying to do is see this through the lens of almost like a fresh viewing,
Right.
um, and to see where this carries as we go into Rise of Skywalker.
And next week, if we continue this, and that's our plan, we'll
Yep,
move from one of my favorite Star Wars films to one of your favorite Star Wars films. As
Revenge of the
we
Sith.
go
I'm a
to
very cliche prequel fan.
Revenge of the Sith. I love Revenge of the Sith, but Attack of the Clones is always going to have a special.
Right. But I'm all stoked to talk. So we'll do something next week, and maybe it'll be a stream. We'll see. But our schedules are both kind of wacky, so it might just be us doing something individually and cut together. We'll see. But we'll let you know. But if you'd like to watch along with us, then next week we'll be talking about Revenge of the Sith as we move in theatrical live action film release.
Yep. But until then, follow us on all the things. You can see all the
Yep.
information there. Nolan plugged our Discord and our Twitter on at a few minutes. Follow those links if you haven't already. If you're here, go ahead and like that stream. Like, there's a lot of you here, and it always makes us sad. Or just dislike it. If you just really hated all this, dislike it, or let us know in the comments like what your favorite questions or thoughts about Attack of the Clones are that we weren't able to talk about. We can keep this conversation going in the comments or on Twitter or on Discord.
For sure.
And if you missed it, we did another stream yesterday, our regular streamcast yesterday on Fortress Vader, Volume 4 of the Charles Soule comic.
Yep.
We're in the middle of doing, if you're not usually paying attention to what we're doing, we do Resistance reviews. Now that Resistance is back, you can check those out. We got a book club going on where Yoda Bauer is reading through a couple of chapters at a time every week through Bloodline. So make sure you're following along with all the different things we have going on.
And if you're interested in even more Star Wars, I will say Skynobi and John Barry in the chat also have Star Wars content on their YouTube channels, so you should check out their channels as well. If we're not quite enough for you.
And speaking of people who do other Star Wars content on YouTube, you may wanna check out our stream this coming week.
Just for it might be cool on Tuesday.
Fingers crossed. But we'll see you guys later. Have a good one.
See ya. Thank you so much. Bye.